Welcome back, everyone, to Inklings Behind the Scenes. This is J.S. Bray with Mr. Bray Labs. So we're going to continue our conversation about creating a production Bible and developing from your two-sheet pitches and moving forward. But this is part two. So if you have not seen part one, please recommend you go check out part one before we really get into part two. Now, I want to kind of preface this is that we have a lot of things that are in the works, a lot of things that are going on, and one of the best ways to kind of create this podcast so that where it's growing and where you can actually kind of follow along. Understand, I don't really expect anyone to have seen all of our episodes or have understand everything there is to know. This is always sort of just a best way to give you a peek inside of what we're going to do. So, just kind of basically an overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about kind of carrying off where we were from last episode, so from part one. We're going to talk about the not more than just the importance of pitch decks and building a production Bible, but also why this is different, why I do it slightly different. I'm going to give you some insights to building your own, and hopefully you just enjoy the ride, that you just have me on in the background while you're creating, or that you can just watch me work to help yourself create as well. The goal is just to kind of give you a peek of what the working progress is. I can't show you everything because this isn't the Truman Show. I'm not that interesting, and I'm going to always be that kind of person who's trying my best to share, but know that I have a life and we all have sort of things that we have to do. So I just say it in this kind of point because I'm starting to feel like I need to apologize, and I feel like if you spend so much time on social media, you may have felt like you needed to apologize for not being as present or sharing things. And the thing is, I've actually grown to realize that that's an unhealthy habit. So if you're so much online, and then if you miss a day or two because of a holiday or family or some sort of event, there's really perhaps you're feeling unnecessary or unneeded stress. So I have filled that bubbling up inside of me, and I don't think anyone's immune to it if you spend a great deal of time online. But with any sort of public efforts, you are in a limelight to some degree, telling people how you're doing what you do. And that does open you up to well, of course, insights, influence, and potentially irritating people. So I'm not going to apologize for if I am not as present all the time, but I will say that my purpose is to share with you the process. So this process is messy. And before we get into really part two of developing a production Bible, understand that messiness is really, in my opinion, it's paramount to productivity. Okay, there is just a little tangent. There is a wonderful theory. Actually, there's a great deal of research behind it called flow. Have you ever heard of the term flow? Flow is the psychology of optimal experiences. Okay. It's something that if you decide to dig into the idea of the theory of flow, how to find yourself in the flow, everyone who has experienced flow knows what I'm talking about. For those who are not familiar with the vocabulary, remember vocabulary will always be cornerstone to understanding any domain of knowledge. Okay, if that be another language, be a career, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be an animator, if you want to be something, you need to learn the vocabulary. And there's a lot of people who know something who are actually quite incredibly intelligent, but they don't know the vocabulary, so they have trouble navigating. Well, half the reason you go to art school, if you choose to go to art school, is to learn the vocabulary. So if you learn the vocabulary for art history, you have probably saved yourself a great deal amount of tuition. But all right, so the point I'm trying to get about is about flow, finding your flow. And at perhaps some point I'll give an actual lecture about this because I've done a lot of research in flow, but I'm going to give you just sort of like what my perspective on it. This is not a subjective thing. Okay. Even though it's going to sound very subjective, it's going to sound like I'm just talking about feels and talking about things that are just as squishy and not concrete. But flow is a concrete thing. There's a great deal of science behind it. And the flow that you need to find when you're working. Okay. You have to ask yourself, what is a flow that you do when you work? For me, it's making a mess. And while I don't like to make a mess with my hands, like I don't like to get greasy or dirty, I don't like to work in cars, I don't like to work on construction, I don't like doing yard work. Doesn't mean I don't work, I just don't like getting physically messy. But my mind can be a cluttered mess at times, and I could have a lot of paperwork, and my office can get sort of disheveled. But there's some sort of desire for people to see things organized. And I think that's great. You want a finished product is going to be organized. Okay, if you grabbed a computer off the shelf, say you went into Apple and you went to buy the computer that you wanted, and all around the completed computer was parts that didn't work. They shaved off this piece of this and that, and all the decals. It was just a mess. But in the rubble, there was a beautiful computer. You just had to kind of dig through the rubble. You'd be like, no way, I'm paying for this. You're going to pay for something that's polished, and I don't argue with that. You know, I used to criticize YouTube for years because of all the sort of clutter and chaos and sort of just, I would say not so quality looking content. But then I realized, but why am I watching it? Why am I enjoying this? Why am I involved with this? Why do I resonate with this? Because life is not polished. Um, products are products are polished, but that's sort of the marketing aspect, kind of giving you an idea that this was always a completed idea. They're not. Um, I like a good mess. I really do. And I have to acknowledge this now because it scares people away when they find out that you are the messy boo. Um, my wife and I, we are rather organized people. We like things to be clean and taken care of in the house. We do have different priorities about how things are cleaned, but ultimately, we want the house to be in order. We want the house to be in order. But we also know that in order to be in order, sometimes there has to be a mess. So there has to be a mess. And I think that is an important thing. Be comfortable with a good mess. Know that the chaos is part of the process. And the chaos does not mean that it always has to be chaotic. But know that for me, this is going to look like spaghetti. And when you see it on the other end, my goodness, I always find it so hilarious because when you're young and you're first starting out and you put out your idea and you're like, oh man, this is so confusing. I don't know where I'm going. I actually know where I'm going. It's quite clear, but I can't. Unfortunately, the technology does not exist for me to broadcast my thoughts. I can't. I cannot share the images in my head. I can always do approximations for that. And so I can't show you I have a clear roadmap in my head. I can only show you that I'm trying to translate that roadmap to my feeble body and my feeble mind and my poor vocabulary as I try to take what's inside my head that's clear and crystalline and oftentimes very sharp and put that together with fuzzy tools. And the fuzzy tools are often my brain and my mouth and my body and my actual software and hardware. Um, that's part of the process. It is. It's messy. So I'm going to give you a little story to kind of illustrate that because we're just walking and talking and talking about the process. And I did mention flow. We're going to talk about flow. We're going to come back to flow. But before we get back to the psychology of optimal experiences, it's a fantastic realm of psychology. I want to share with you a story that my grandpa used to tell me, and I have a fair amount of these because who my grandfather was to me. Um, so when he was young, he was in the Navy, and my grandfather served on the USS Lofberg. He served in the Korean War. And my grandfather, he really did have endless stories, but he was always a very clever man. His last name was McCain. His name was Neil McCain, and he was so industrious. He could really just like he was an inventor. He was a business owner. He was a wonderful husband and father and grandfather, and he was definitely my hero and inspiration to me. And he taught me a lot of things. He taught me how to, if I want to invent something, I can do it. Just do it. He showed me at 6 years old how to make my own radio. I made a radio with parts where basically was copper coil and a toilet paper roll. He showed me how to put together schematics. He sold inventions to Texas Instruments. My grandfather was brilliant. Um, and he was a person like anyone else who had, I'm sure he had flaws and things that people liked and didn't like about him, but he was an inspiration to me. And one time he told me of this really brilliant invention. And I want to illustrate this brilliant invention because you don't always know how these innovations are going to come to be. You don't always know. And so this invention that he came up with a waterless washing machine. Okay, a waterless washing machine. And he learned how to do this while he was in the Navy, and he was a sonarman. And so his job was to listen for things. He listened for different sounds, potentially the enemy, or potentially a whale, or something that was trying to decipher what things were using sonar. And one of the uses that he did while he was in the Navy, and this, of course, this is in the early 50s, he discovered that they would ping, which is what you do is you ping a piece of sonar. You'd shoot sonar to it would go ping, ping, and you'd ping out that sonar. And when that sonar would hit something, it would bounce back and kind of give you more information about what it is. So if it's a whale, or if it's a boat, or if it's something else, right? Well, they would use this sonar, and they would shoot it on other ships. And what they discovered is that sonar is they could dial in the sonar at such a frequency that it would knock the barnacles off the ship. Okay, and so fascinating, right? He's there, and they would just say, "Oh, there's barnacles all across the ship." If you're familiar with this sort of aspect, boats get barnacles. They do. And so just the sonar sound would just knock all these barnacles off the ship. And so what he did is he later on took that same insight and said, my goodness, I wonder if I could use sonar to wash clothing. And he did. He actually invented a waterless washing machine that could make clothes pristine clean. Now, hear me out. He was able to just from his experience, from the Navy to the laundry room, right? From the Lofberg to the laundry room, he was able to come up with this invention that would take clothes and clean it without water. Fascinating, exciting, but there was a downside to it. One of the downsides that he discovered was while you can make clothes pristine clean, it would wash dirt, you get all those things off, just like it would knock off the barnacles off a boat. It failed in one aspect because it didn't account for how the frequency would impact buttons. It would absolutely shatter buttons. Now, later on, I believe he had it patented, and with all that goes, he's now passed away. I'm not sure if anyone ever has decided to create a waterless washing machine based upon such schematics, but it works, and it is a powerful invention that he had to have an experience to come to that understanding. And so what I'm trying to get at is that my grandfather, he was a young man there was no way that he was going to know at some point that I was going to use this knowledge to come up with potential, not I wouldn't say a failed invention, I would say an invention that was ahead of its time, that no one has quite figured out how to market. Maybe you could use it for towels, but it still was an insight. And so that is why the process needs to be messy. So the process needs to be messy. When you are coming up with an innovation, you have to have a lot of problems. You cannot just have a clear, this is how we get there. So navigating a road is great, but it's the process going over the bumps, laying down the tracks. It's actually that sort of cutting the groove that teaches you how to deal with the different solutions, because you are creating new things. So with Inklings, I have a strong idea of who these characters are. I'm bringing them life. We have all these voice actors. We're doing interviews with them. We're putting all this sort of efforts. We're laying down the rails and the tracks. We're shooting out the sonar against the other boats and trying to get all the barnacles off. We're figuring that out. The show is still coming to life, and it really will come to life for a long time. If you can challenge yourself to look at your productions more like processes instead of finished products, it may help you. It may help you realize that making a mistake or being messy is important. Now, I'm going to get people that are going to say, well, I don't believe that you're building something good because I don't see the vision in your head. I don't see the materials that you're creating. I just see a lot of clutter. I don't see a finished product. That's what I want to see. I want to see a finished product. Well, I'll tell you, you've seen a great deal of finished products. You've seen a great deal of animation. You've seen a great deal of materials. You've seen a lot of stuff together. You just may have not seen it in the way that you perceive animation consumption. And so that is something like you watch a SpongeBob, and I mentioned SpongeBob a lot. You watch a Batman. My favorite Batman was Bruce Timm. His version of Batman is just, to me, I still feel like that's the gold standard. And for a lot of reasons, the art, the design, the characters. I mean, my goodness, the best Batman voice ever. But I believe it was Kevin Conway, and I think he passed away recently. I'm so sad. But my point I'm trying to get at is that the messiness is part of the process, and invention is also, it needs problems, right? And so if you have a very clear, pristine production pipeline, and if you know how things are supposed to be done, that is wonderful for churning out results, but it's not for creating inventions. And so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to challenge you to be messy. I'm going to challenge you to think that, you know what, this messy process is a part of creating a great product. There's a lot of people who want to pretend like the sausage comes out perfectly made, but it's messy. It's always messy before it gets great. Now, from the consumer side, people want something that's easy and digestible and doesn't look ugly and doesn't have all that sort of, ups and downs and craziness to it. And that's understandable that you have become conditioned to believe that great products are easy to see and use. But great products experience pain, sweat, frustration, complete chaos, and mess. Now, back to flow. Why does flow matter? And you need to find your flow. You need to find your flow. And my flow actually is oftentimes, it has certain conditions and it requires intentionality. So, and I possibly will break into like the whole eight, like the matrix of flow, finding the 8 ways of engagement. You can look this up, okay? You can look up flow, how to find flow, how does find flow in your organization, in your animation process, all these different things. But I'll tell you, for me, the flow has to be intentional. I have to be intentional, and I have to allow myself to be focused. So, one of my college professors, his name was Lee White, a wonderful artist, illustrator. He said the key to being productive was intensity times duration equals productivity. So however long you can stay focused on a task, that's going to equal how productive you are. And he's, for the most part, very correct. I can get more work done, oftentimes in much fewer hours, if I am incredibly focused. The hard part is getting focused. And getting focused is not, how to put it, it's not always something that you can do alone. If you work from home, you probably have a lot of distractions that you don't have at the office. Now, when you work at the office, you also have distractions that you don't have at home. And so there's always going to be distractions. For me, I work from home. I work from home and I love it. I love it. And I'll tell you why I love it. I love it because I can be there for my family. That's what I love most about it. The downside is that I am always available to my family. And this is not a bad thing. It's just the downside because, I have a newborn and, well, I would say my son Eli is almost 2 months old. That's not, he's almost to the point where he's past the newborn stage to just infant. But I have a little one. And I also have another son, and we have our family at home, and there's times that my wife needs me, or the animals, or there's little home errands. These things happen. So you have to find ways. You have office hours, or you have ways to kind of figure that out. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you that you're not alone in having to prioritize. So for me, I know that I have distractions, and I have to find healthy ways of getting ahead of that so that the distractions don't kick me out of flow, because flow is important. Flow is very important to being productive. And so for me, it's intentional. First off, it's intentional. And my other part about finding flow is non-judgmental. Okay? You cannot allow yourself to do flow-like tasks through a deep set of judgments. And so this does not mean that you are like inebriated or that you're intoxicated or that you're completely clueless to any sort of process. It's that you cannot allow yourself to be so strangled by creating perfect art. You cannot think about it in the process to where it has to be a perfect railroad. You cannot do that. Creative processes where they find flow need, for me, is they need to be intentional and non-judgmental. So intentional and non-judgmental. And so from there, I can say, hey, I'm going to spend 20 minutes, I'm going to spend an hour, I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes, and I'm going to grind. There's always going to be times, my goodness, there's days that I have to just fill out invoices and do administrative tasks and back and forth and boring meetings and don't really get anything that I like to get done, but still things that need to get done. These things happen. And so, but that is not good content for the stream. No one cares about that. No one's watched me answer emails or just reply to somebody on LinkedIn or schedule a meeting. Those are important parts of running your business, but that's not interesting. And so here I am talking to you while I design and create and put together the pitch. I'm telling you the importance of flow. Okay, find your flow. Part two is all about your flow. And my flow is messy. It's messy, it's intentional, and it's non-judgmental. And so as I put things together, I know that I'm laying all my Legos out. So when I was a kid, I was a kid in the 80s. Okay. So I'm older than probably a lot of people who follow the stream. But when I was a kid in the 80s, they used to be with this bucket of Legos, and you could get it for nothing. Okay, you could get it for nothing. And you could get a huge bucket of Legos, and they were all the pieces, including the body shape characters and the heads and the arms and hands. You could get a bucket of just everybody, right? And I would throw it on the living room floor or wherever we're at. And of course, this was a nightmare to your mother, right? A nightmare to anyone who had to vacuum this up. But as a kid, you could throw it all out there, and I would just start assembling things, just putting things together. And sometimes I just love to seeing like the whole process. Eventually, at the other end, a vehicle was made, or a building was made, or some sort of cool new experience. A fort was made for my characters. But that would, if I just sat there with the instructions, and this is sort of my critique against these monumental Lego assembly line products, that while they're pristine and beautiful, that's not how I played with Legos. I don't get into that. I don't. I personally don't understand it. To me, Lego is not about having structured rules. It's about taking your creativity and making whatever you imagine. Now, imagine the nightmares of parents, stepping on a Lego or having to, pull up something. But ultimately, you're only going to make Legos. See, that's the thing. When you have a messy but intentional creative process, you can actually create content, create products that are still going to be good, even though they are seemingly a mess. Because when you throw all those Legos out there and you lose yourself in the play, see, that is the whole point. I cannot find play, which is the cornerstone to flow, okay, being intentional and being non-judgmental and finding that sense of joy and that pleasure in the mess, right? Just being that little kid who rolls in the mud. If I can't have an equivalent for myself when I'm creating, then I'm sort of working. I'm just coming up with just doing assembly line tasks. That's not interesting. That's not interesting to me. It will lose me, and I will put it off if it's assembly line task. This also makes it difficult to work with creatives. If you are a very analytical, organized person, working with creatives is going to frustrate you to no end. It's actually why I think I make a great leader in that aspect, because I understand both sides. I understand we need to be organized, but I'm a messy guy. I'm messy and I'm disorganized, and I take forever to do things that I don't like to do, and I lose myself in the play of the experience, and I make a meal out of those things because they're what I enjoy the most. It's what I enjoy the most. And so in this sort of important process to creating a production Bible, knowing that we're translating, we talked about it last time, translating from a 2-sheet to a production Bible. We talked about the why it matters. We talked about creating building materials. But I want you to think about your flow. think about your flow. What is your flow, your creative flow? Eventually I want to take some more time to go down the components of creating a production Bible. But if you don't have a flow that works for you, if you can't be intentional and non-judgmental and have a good time doing it, I'm going to tell you, you might be in the wrong business. Listen to me. If you cannot enjoy the creative process, and it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Okay? Athletes find flow. Athletes go out there and they work their bodies to just trembling. Athletes find flow. Artists find flow. Musicians, mathematicians, anyone who finds himself lost. It's like casinos have this where they don't have clocks because they want you to forget where you're at. It's on purpose. They design it that way so you can get lost in whatever you're doing. The adrenaline. Now, I don't gamble. I don't really gamble. I don't find that stuff appealing. It just seems like a waste. I'd rather go play a video game or spend time with my kids. But nonetheless, the point I'm trying to get at is that that's the thing. If you cannot play in the mess of your creativity, if that doesn't bring you some sort of satisfaction, I pray for you, but I don't think you should be a creative. I don't think you should create. If you only about organization and setting all your blocks in a perfect order, you are going to struggle with creativity. You're going to struggle with that. And I'm not judging you in a sense. I'm just kind of giving you a human observation that you need to rediscover that messy play. You need to find your inner toddler that wants to roll in the mud, have a good time, or lay, that little kid in you that wants to lay every single random non-branded Lego on the floor and start creating things. If you cannot do that, then you're really going to stifle your creativity. You're going to stifle innovation. You're going to stifle that opportunity that you're going to see. So again, I've talked a great deal about flow, finding flow, and knowing that these messy experiences that we have, they create innovation. Okay, they create innovation. And it may not seem like developing a pitch deck and developing a production Bible corresponds to this. Just walking and talking while you watch me work. It does. It actually helps me a great deal to share with you my internal process, why I do things that seemingly unrelated, but they are. You start creating a mess and having a good time, you'll lose track of time. You'll lose track of time, and it'll be the best time you ever had. And so I thank you so much again for listening. This has been a good time just to engage with you. I thank you for being here and being part of this community. I challenge you to go outside and play outside your comfort zone. Or if you know what that is, you know what it is to make a good mess and have a good time and to innovate and create something, please tell me your process. Email me, reach out to me on social media. I live mostly on LinkedIn. I do play with other social media sites, basically have a presence there. But if you're on LinkedIn and you message me, you're going to hear from me. That's for sure. If you want to for sure hear from me, send me an email at Jesse, Jesse, at MrBray.com. And of course, please continue to like and subscribe. I'm here to serve you. I love that you're here. I love that you're learning. I love that you're part of this community. And I can't wait to continue to keep inspiring you. Thank you for being a part of Inklings. And you have a blessed, blessed, blessed day.